He thought he could corner Karoline Leavitt instead. She flipped the script and exposed his biggest lie on live TTV. The studio lights burn bright, reflecting off the polished glass desk where the night's main event was about to unfold. The network's flagship political talk show, The Evening Pulse, had a reputation for being a battlefield, and tonight was no exception. Seated on one side of the desk, leaning forward with his signature smirk, was Graham W. Walters, the network's top political commentator, a seasoned host with decades in the business. He had a well-practiced style, interrupting and grandrassing, dominating his audience. They expected him to run circles around his guests, especially conservatives on the other side. Karoline L. Leavitt, poised and ready, adjusted the lapel microphone clip to her navy B blazer. She knew exactly what she was walking into. She wasn't naive. This was enemy territory, and the crowd, both in the studio and watching at home, wasn't on her side. The intro music faded, the camera zoomed in, and Graham wasted no time. Tonight we have with us Karoline L. Leavitt, former Trump White House assistant press secretary and political co-commentator, sized to talk about the state of the economy, media responsibility, and some, let's say, controversial claims she's been making about our network. Chuckled, shaking his head slightly as if he already knew this was going to be an easy win. Karoline, let's start with something simple. Why you've been very vocal about what you call media manipulation. Why you claim networks like ours intentionally mislead the public. That's a pretty serious accusation. Where's your proof? Karoline didn't flinch. She kept her expression calm even as she felt the subtle shift in the audience's energy. They were waiting for her to stumble, to second-guess herself, but she didn't. Graham, I don't need to claim anything. The proof is in your own reporting, she said smoothly, tilting her head slightly. Let's talk about inflation. Last year this very network told Americans inflation was transitory, that it was right-wing fear-mongering, mongering.m and everyday families can barely afford groceries, eggs are up 30%, gas is through the roof, and suddenly you all are acting like this is brand new information. So tell me, was it incompetence or dishonesty? The smile on Graham's face twitched. He had expected pushback, but not like this. Karoline, economics is complex and no one could have predicted. Her voice sharp but controlled. Noon or just the media, because there were experts warning about this for months, but they weren't the ones you put on air, were they? The crowd shifted. Some murmured. Raham leaned back in his chair, gripping his cue cards a little tighter. Look, we report facts, and if you want to cherry pick. Pick.pok's talk about crime. Karoline pressed on your network, which ran months of segments about mostly peaceful protests while cities burnt. Why you don't played riots, you ignored business owners getting their livelihoods destroyed, and now suddenly crime is a serious issue because polling says voters care about lit. Is lit? Did crime just appear out of nowhere, or did you all ignore it because it didn't fit your narrative? Raham exhaled sharply through his nose, shifting in his seat. The usual rhythm of his interviews wasn't working. Normally at this point his guests would be stammering, trying to backpedal or deflect, but Karoline wasn't rattled, and the audience could feel lit. But Graham wasn't about to let her take control. He straightened up, ready to turn the heat up even higher. Raham's fingers drummed lightly on the desk as he recalibrated. He wasn't about to let Karoline control the narrative. She had taken down tougher opponents before, senators, CEOs, and even former presidents. All right. Karoline, he said, forcing a chuckle as he leaned forward, why you're passionate. I'll give you that, but let's be real here. Conservative media does the exact same thing you're accusing us of to push their own agenda. Spin stories and ignore facts. Do you seriously expect people to believe that only liberal networks are guilty of this? It was a classic move. Lip the accusation and paint her as a hypocrite. He expected her to fumble to get defensive. She didn't take the bait. I fully acknowledge that media bias exists on both sides, she said without hesitation. The difference is your network pretends it doesn't have Fox News, for example, doesn't hide that it leans conservative, but your network, you sell yourself as the neutral voice, the trusted source, and that's the problem because you're not. Raham's jaw tightened slightly. The audience might not have noticed, but Karoline, did you say you report facts? She continued, her tone unwavering. Let's test that right now. See crime is skyrocketing in cities like Philadelphia. Baltimore and San Francisco are all Democrat run, but if someone watches your network they'd think crime is just a right-wing talking point that's dishonest. Why didn't you just say the truth? That's ridiculous. Raham shot back. We cover crime when it's convenient. She interrupted. Your network covered the recent crime wave only after swing state voters started ranking it as a top concern. Before it had, you called it hysteria. I mean, come on, G. Graham, do you really expect people not to notice? His lips pressed together. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Let's talk about January 6th. Then he pivoted quickly, his voice gaining an edge. You want to talk about selective outrage? Your side defends what happened that day while condemning other protests. You call for law and order. He thought he could corner Karoline Leavitt instead. He sheeped the script and exposed his biggest lie on live TV. Studio lights burnt bright, flecking off the polished glass desk where the night's main event was about to unfold. That works flagship political talk show. Theening pool pulse. A reputation for being a battlefield. Tonight was no exception. Seated one side of the desk, aiming forward with his signature smirk, Graham Walters, Network's top political commentator, seasoned with decades in the bus business, had a well-practiced style, tinterrupting pandrassing, dominating's audience. They pected him to run circles around his guests, especially conservatives on the other side. Karoline Leavitt isd and ready, just the lapelcrophone clipped to her navy blablazer. Is she exactly what she was walking into? He wasn't knave, this enemy territory. The crowd in the studio watching at home SNT on her side. Thetro music faded, camera zoomed in. Graham wasted no time. And tonight have with us Karoline Leavitt, Trump White House Assistant Press Secretary and Political commentator. Isto talk about the state of the eco-economy. Arrest responsibility. Somsome say controversial claims she's been making about our network. Hugh chuckled, okaying his head slightly as if he already knew this was going to be an easy win-win. Karoline, start with something simple. You've been very vocal about what you call media manipulation. You aim networks like ours intentionally mislead the public. Thought a pretty serious accusation. Were your pro-proof? Karoline didn't flinch. Kept her expression calm even as she felt the subtle shift in the audience's energy. They are waiting for her to stumble, second-guess her herself. She did it. I don't need to claim anything. Proof is in your own rep reporting, said smoothly, elting her head slightly. Let's talk about inflation. Laster this very network told Americans inflation was transitory, it was right-winger fear-mongering. Mongering.n now everyday families can barely afford groceries. GS are up 30%. S is through the roof. Suddenly you all are acting like this is brand new information. Soul me, is it incompetence or dishonesty? Theo on Graham's face twitched, had expected pushback but not like this. Well, our Karoline, onomics is complex. No one could have predicted she shet in our voice sharp but controlled. New one, just the media, cause there were experts warning about this for months. They weren't the ones you put on air either they? Ouch shifted. Me murmured. Ham leaned back in his chat chair, ipping his cue cards a little tighter. Oh look, report facts. If you want to cherry pick. Pick.cook talk about crime. Karoline pressed on your network, which in months of segments about mostly peaceful protests while cities burnt. You played Rio riots, you ignored business owners getting their livelihoods destroyed. Now suddenly crime is a serious issue because polling says voters care about it. Soich is it? Deem just appear out of nowhere. Did you all ignore it because it didn't fit your narrative? Ham exhaled sharply through his nose, ifting in his seat. Ethual rhythm of his interviews wasn't working. Normally this point his guests would be stammering, ying to backpedal or deflect. Karoline wasn't rattled. The audience could feel it. Graham wasn't about to let her take control. Her rate up, addy to turn the heat up even higher. Ham's fingers drummed lightly on the desk as he recalibrated, wasn't about to let Karoline control the narrative. Had taken down tougher opponents before, senators, OCEOs, and former prep presidents all great. Karoline, Sai said, rissing a chuckle as he leaned forward. You par passionate, I'll give you that hat. Let's be real here. Conservative media does the exact same thing you're accusing us of thish their own age agenda. Spiner stories and nor facts. Do seriously expect people to believe that only liberal works are guilty of this? It's a classic move. P the accusation and int her as a hypocrite. Hepected her to fumble to get defensive. E didn't take the buy bait. Oh, fully acknowledge that media bias exists on both sides, E said without hesitation. E references your network pretends it doesn't have one. X new news are extra example, S&T hide that it leans conservative, T your network, you sell yourself as the neutral voice, E trusted source, D that's the problem because you're not. Ham's jaw tightened slightly, E Thedience might not have noticed, T Karoline, do you say you report facts? Shin continued, our tone unwavering, sots test that right now, I crime skyrocketing in cities like Philadelphia. Timor and San Francisco are a rel DM Democrat run, T if someone watches your network, E-wide think crime is just a right Wingle point that's dishonest. YWH do you just say the truth? A that ridiculous. Ham shot back we've a crime when it's convenient sure. Sheet erupted Yortwork covered the recent crime wave only after swing state voters started ranking it as a top concern B. Before that you called it hysteria may mean me on A Graham, you really expect people not to notice hi? Hisps pressed together th, this and T how it was supposed to go la. Let talk about January 6 th then pivoted key quickly, S voice gaining an edge You'nt to talk about selective outrage You'd defends what happened that day while condemning other protests You'll for law and order. Except then it's your people breaking the law tell me Caroline do you justify that a murmur rippled through your audience, no had he here, T least that's what he thought hot. Roline inhaled deeply, odding as if she expected the question. Aham I've said from day one that anyone who committed a crime that day should be prosecuted, but let's compare that to what your network did in 2020. You downplayed months of riots, looting and violence as mostly peaceful. You defended politicians who bailed rioters out of jail, and yet January 6th is treated like the single greatest threat to democracy while entire cities burned under policies you refuse to criticize. That's the double standard, and Americans see it. The studio fell uncomfortably quiet. Even some of the panelists looked toward Graham waiting for his response. He needed to regain control. So what, Caroline, you're saying we shouldn't talk about January 6th, he said, voice laced with frustration. No, I'm saying tell the truth, she replied firmly. Cover both, hold everyone accountable, not just when it's politically convenient. That's what real journalism looks like. For a split second Graham hesitated, his mind scrambled for the next move, the next attack, but the energy in the room had shifted, and for the first time he wasn't sure he was the one in control anymore. Graham forced a grin, the kind that masked irritation. He wasn't used to losing ground this early. His guests, typically buckled under pressure, struggled to keep up, but Caroline wasn't flustered. She wasn't scrambling. If anything, she was settling in, taking her time, making every word count. Alright, Isazade, exhaling through his nose and lipping his cue cards for a new and angled. You had your moment, let's talk about something else. Sinformation youned others on the right love to throw that word at users. Your side is guilty of spreading just as many lilies. Tarkehe election fraud claims or example. Roline lifted a hand slightly, topping he him. Wait, old onan, he sazade, ilting her he head. You talking about misinformation? Aham bull blinked. Yeah, he said slowly, cokery, hen let's really talk about it. Temperature in the studio seemed to rise for moments. Yortwork told people that if they got the COVID vaccine, hey wouldn't get infected. Uald anyone who questioned it a conspiracy theorist. Nd no. Woe years later, he same health officials you praised are admitting that wasn't true. H that misinformation. H whereas the co-correction. H whereas the accountability. Theudience murmured. Aham's eyes flickered toward his producers. He hadn't planned for this detour that was based on the best available information at the time. Caroline interrupted, haking her he head. H that not how journalism works. H the rest available information should have included the voices you silenced. Scientists, doctors, Andiopol who had co-concerns. N instead, our network demonized them, them banned from social media. Nd now you're pretending it never happened. Aham clenched his jaw. Alright, you want to talk about accountability, let's talk about your side's responsibility for political violence. You'll act like it's only one party at fault. Let's not forget Republicans have pushed dangerous rhetoric. Donald Trump told his supporters to fight like hell on January 6th. Of them listened. Ep pliart huhurt. How you defend that hat? Tis a classic play ring up tr Trump her defend he him. And at her on shaky ground. Ubutyroline wasn't bebeting. I first for law. Ram I don't defend violence eviva ut since you brought up rhetoric, it's be co-consistent. H Weninator Chuck Schumer stood in front of the Supreme Court and told justices they would pay the price if they ruled a certain way. ND then a man showed up outside Brett Kavanaugh's house with a gugoon as your network who outraged. Oh no, oh you barely covered it. Aham opened his momouth, ut she kept going when Maxine Waters told protesters to get more confrontational with political opponents. ND conservatives were harassed at restaurants and hazed out of public spaces. H whereas the outrage. H whereas your call for accountability? The audience was shifting. H the lance of power in the room had tilted. ND Graham could feel it. Oh look, Sarzade, running a hand through his hair. His isn't about cherry-picking incidents. Oh no, Caroline co-countered. His is about double standards. That why people don't trust you. Because if political violence is wrong and ISIS, then's wrong no matter who does it. ND if rhetoric is dangerous and can be, then no need to call it out of everywhere or just when it helps your rare ratings. E leaned forward slightly. So Graham I'll ask you, can you admit your network applies different standards based on the political party involved? For a fraction of a second Graham Walters, the man known for always having the last word, hesitated, but that second of silence said more than any response ever could. Graham shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of the weight in the room. His job was to control the conversation, steer it back to safe waters, but Karoline had flipped the script and now for the first time in years he was the one grasping for footing. His earpiece crackled, a producer no doubt urging him to cut to a break. He ignored it. He wasn't going to let this moment spiral any further. All right Karoline, he said, forcing a chuckle, you've made your accusations be you beautits be ho-honest. Oh you re part of the right Wingidia machine yourself. Oh yauked like an outsider. Ut you push talking points just like everyone else. F5 twerks like ours are guilty of bibias. Hat makes you any different? Was a last-ditch effort to discredit her, to make her seem like just another partisan player, but Karoline didn't flinch. I'm different because I don't pretend to be something I'm not, she shot back. I don't sit behind a desk, claim I'm objective, and then quietly push narratives that benefit one political party. That's what your network does. Graham, you claim to be fair, you claim to be neutral, but the facts prove otherwise. Graham scoffed, shaking his head. You keep saying facts Karoline, but all I hear our opinions. That was the moment, the precise second everything shifted, because Karoline was ready for this. She reached into the stack of papers she had brought with her, a calculated move, and pulled out a printed headline from Graham's own network. She held it up, letting the cameras capture every word. These is your network's headline in 2021. Our crime eve is a GOP care to tactic ut fast forward. Oh years, and now you're running segments on the crime crisis. So which is it, Graham? Was crime a scare tactic, or is it a real issue now that it's affecting voter sentiment? She didn't wait for him to answer. She reached for another page. Here's another one. Inflation fears are overblown, economy is strong. You ran this in early 2022 while Americans were already struggling to afford basic necessities. By the end of the year you admitted inflation was a serious crisis. So what changed, the economy or your willingness to admit the truth? The audience murmured. Graham opened his momouth, hen closed it. His jaw was tight. Ut Karoline wasn't dodone. ND this onone, he Sarzade, yuling out one last sheet, a voice steady. The Hunter Biden laptop story is Russian disinformation. Yortwork ran that headline over and over. Aldit a co-conspiracy, oct anyone who even questioned it. Ut now even your own journalists admit the laptop was real. ND you expect the American people to just forget that hat? Aham's face darkened. The studio was dead silent. A few wows into the audience, Omion let out a quiet wow. The panelist the side of the C-set, Sully quick to jump in and back Graham up, air stiff in their seats. None wanted to be the first to speak. Roline set the papers down. Oh tell me Graham, here's the accountability. A flicker of something crossed his face. Embarrassment, rough frustration. He glanced off camera toward his producers as if hoping for an escape route. Othing came his lips parted slightly as if he were about to say sosamething. Prepared line. We will said a dismissal. Ut nothing came because there was nothing he could sorcery. ND in that moment, he great Graham W. Walters, he man who had humiliated countless conservative googists, as speechless Thielance stretched longer than it should her Harvey. Enter television. Ed Air was a cardinal sin P. Producer scrambled behind the scenes, trying to salvage the moment. Ut the damage had already been done. Aham W. Walters, he man who built a career on controlling co-conversations, had no response. Witty co-comeback. Ando rehearsed deflection. Karoline sat still, atching him, itting the weight of the moment settle in scheiden smusmerk. He didn't gloat, he just waited. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Some viewers shifted in their seats, glancing at one another as if unsure of what they had just witnessed. The usual flow of the show had been disrupted. The host was supposed to dominate, the guest was supposed to fumble, but this time the script had flipped. A panelist, Lounge commentator known for parroting network-approved lines, cleared his throat, desperate to break the tension. Well, Tharta's superlot Sarzade awking an awkward chuckle, let's be real here. Karoline, he media isn't perfect usual, you're acting like one side is completely innocent. I writing outlets push misinformation all the time. Do expect us to believe they're any better. Lifeline a distraction, an attempt to drag Karoline back into a debate she had already won. She could have taken the easy route, thrown out a standard both sides have their flaws response and moved on, but she wasn't about to let them shift focus. That's not the argument, she said, turning her attention to the pain list. I'm not here to defend anyone, I'm here to hold you accountable, your network, your leadership, your narratives. Every time you're caught misleading the public, you pivot, you blame others, you change the subject. The young painlist faltered. This wasn't what he signed up for. Graham, still recovering, finally leaned forward, desperate to regain control. Okay, Karoline, he said, his voice a little sharper. Now you've made your point, but let's not pretend this is some kind of conspiracy. We make mistakes, sure. So does every media outlet. That osnt mean there's an ag agenda. Weak defense, lawless ditch tempt to frame everything as simple human error. Karoline exhaled softly, haking her head. Graham, mistakes happen. These aren't me mistakes. Hey, reaper patterns, ND patterns tell us story. She stood toward the papers she had set on the desk earlier. This and just one bad he headline. 04th Basir report, T's years of deception. Pete narratives designed to control public perception. ND when the truth finally comes out, our network acts like it never happened. No retractions, OAP apologies, UST sisilence. Aham shifted arg again. The fight was leaving him. He knew she was right. Admitting it. Tharta's something he simply couldn't dodo. Therajuicers were frantic rowing signals from behind the cameras. Thenteview had veered into dangerous territory. He control they once had over the conversation was gone. Ram glanced toward the teleprompter. Here a new message had appeared. Ukuto break. He knew it was too late. He damage had already been dodone. The screen abruptly cut to co-commercial. The audience barely had time to register the sudden shift before an upbeat jingle for a pharmaceutical ad filled the air. It didn't matter. He moment had already bubbed self into their mimins. Back in the studio, tension was thick. Aham ripped off his earpiece, his face tight with frustration as he turned toward his producers. What the hell was that, he muttered under his breath. Karoline didn't move. She sat calmly in her chair watching the scramble around her. The painlists murmured amongst themselves, some shaking their heads, others stealing nervous glances at the host. A makey assistant rushed onto the C-set, abbying at Graham's forehead as he exhaled sharply, trying to regain composure. There was no recovering from this. The image had already spread beyond the studio. His show was being live-streamed on social media. ND within seconds, he clips started making their rounds, erst short snippets. Karoline holding up the headlines, Graham sitting in stunned silence, then full-length breakdowns, captions calling it the most embarrassing moment of his career. Twitter was on fire. Breaking: Karoline Leavitt destroys mainstream media hypocrisy live on air. Aham Walters left speechless. Never thought I'd see the day when someone made Graham Walters shut up. See iconic. This what happens when corporate media finally gets called out in real time. Hey, have no defense. No away. The yet her back on this network arg again. He just bubent higher entire narrative to the ground within minutes. Conservative outlets picked up the story. Headlines blasted across their pages. Karoline Leavitt obliterates liberal media's lies in explosive showdown. Theatwork host left stammering as guests exposed years of deception. It wasn't just right Wingedia taking no notice. Then independent journalists suely wary of taking sides, air sharing the clip, alling it the moment corporate news finally got caught. Theatwork's PR team scrambled desperately, trying to control the narrative. The internet had already made up its mind as the commercial break neared its end. Aham inhaled deeply, orking a composed expression back onto his face. The cup artist retreated. He produces signaled 0 seconds. He hearn to Kaya Karoline, is voice lower is tone laced with irritation. We coming back from break. Suggest you reel it in. Karoline simply smiled. Don't take suggestions from people who lost the argument. Aham clenched his jaw. He had no time to respond. The screen flashed Babak. He intro music played. Nd the camera zoomed in. Halasted on his usual media friend Lurgren. The energy had shifted. Thudience wasn't looking at him the same way. He had seen something they weren't supposed to see. Nd no amount of damage control could change that. The roadcast continued. It didn't matter anymore. Theomant had already escaped their control. Thudience wasn't focused on what Graham was sorcerying. They were replaying the sibilance. Hesitation. The way Karoline had turned his own tactics against him. He tried to regain the rhythm to steer the conversation back into safe territory. All right, let's shift gears, but it was too late. People weren't buying it in the control room. The producers were scrambling. The network's executives were already on the phone discussing how to spin the damage, how to handle the inevitable fallout. Some were calling for a media blackout. Don't acknowledge it, don't amplify it, let it die out. Others were already drafting statements, preparing their damage control strategy, but none of it would work because something had changed. Viewers had seen in real time what it looked like when power was challenged, when narratives crumbled under the weight of truth, when someone refused to be silenced, and that was something they wouldn't forget. Karoline knew it too. As soon as the segment wrapped, she walked off the set with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout. No gloating, no celebration, just certainty. One of the younger staffers from the network, probably an intern, caught up with her near the exit. Miss Leavitt. Hat wawas, I'm Ian. Oh wow, Sazaid. Haking his head. They definitely not inviting you back after this. Shemsmerked. They're never planning to invite me Babak. Nd that was the truth. This had never been about fair debate. E-Network had booked her expecting an easy win, a punching bag to reinforce their narrative. Instead they had handed her a platform, and she had used it to tear their credibility apart piece by piece. Outside, the night air was crisp, the city buzzing with its usual energy, but in millions of homes across America people were still watching the clip, analyzing it, sharing it, talking about what it meant, because this wasn't just about one debate, it wasn't just about Graham Walters, it was about something much bigger. People were waking up to the bias, to the manipulation, to the way truth was twisted, ignored, or buried when it didn't serve the right interests, and no matter how hard the media tried, they couldn't put that awareness back in the bottle. The truth was out. Nd there was no going Babak. If you retired of the deception, if you believe in holding the media accountable, okay, sure to like, comment, Nd subscribe. Omoriopal need to see moments like this, or people need to wake up. Let keep the conversation going.